Well, today I want to do a video on the discussion of God's will and what kind of limits or can we actually break God's will? And I think this is a really interesting, important question. Here like against stuff like abortion that is against God's will, that you're interfering with God's will, or that you know Terry Schiavo was against God's will, letting her die. Because if God, we should just let God decide when she's going to die and let her live as long as God wants her to. You know, or X is against God's will. Homosexuality being part of the nation is against God's will. Everything seems to be against God's will if Christians don't like it. And I know not all Christians do, but I mean, whatever at the moment seems to be a Christian doesn't like. But the question I really want to ask is, can anything actually be against God's will? People will say free will and all that, but God's omniscient and supposed to know everything. Or at least intelligent enough to know everything from the future. You know, you can predict what's going to happen based upon all the factors, knowing everybody's mind, knowing what everybody's thinking. Now here's the thing that comes to mind, like especially let's take abortion. Is abortion really be against God's will? Would God really, knowing all things that are going to happen, are you saying that God would put the soul in a baby, knowing full 100% well that God is going to, that the woman is going to kill the baby? She still has free will to choose from her perspective, but God knows she's going to kill that baby. So is God really going to put a soul in that baby, knowing full well it's going to die? No, is God throwing away souls and all the eggs that don't fertilize, all the eggs and all the, you're just going to put souls in all the babies that don't make it to birth, or are stillborn, or die from horrible diseases like Harlequin's disease? Is God putting all these souls in all these babies that don't make it past a few minutes of birth? That seems a bit wasteful, and it seems to me rather incompetent. I'm sorry, but I mean, if God really knows everything, He would know when to or when not to put a soul in a child. He would know what's going to happen. He would know the effects of everything. And it just seems to me that, that it couldn't actually go against His will. And then I did this video on the right to die, of dignity. And, we got the whole issue of, people believe that people committing suicide or, forcing someone, letting someone die on life support is against God's will because God will take them in their time. But theoretically, isn't keeping her alive against God's will? Shouldn't nature be allowed to take its course? If God wants her to live longer, He can do it with or without machines. So let the machines, if the person wants to die, and their free will is let them decide that they want to die, let nature take its course, and God will keep her alive even if the machines are turned off because that's His will. If His will is for her to continue to live, He will allow her to live regardless of what we do. I don't know. These things just sort of frustrate me because it seems to me that, people claim that X is against God's will, but then want to do everything they can to enforce what they think is God's will. But God is God. God's will is going to happen regardless of whatever you want to do. I don't believe in God, but I'm trying to argue from your point of view. I'm trying to argue from what you guys claim. And I don't think you can just simply say that abortion is wrong because it's against God's will. Do you know God's will? Do you know for 100% sure that God doesn't plan for every contingency? What if God doesn't want a woman to have a child? And no plans for a woman not having a child because she's not ready. And instead, you're trying to force her to have a child against God's will. I mean, you can get into these really big back and forths. So I really think any argument that tries to use God's will fails, and it's because you don't actually know what God's will is. I mean, you can be disgusted by abortion and get against abortion. That's fine. But, your disgust against something doesn't necessarily allow you to decide for everybody else. I don't know. I don't know. This is something I figured would be something to think about. Let me know your thoughts below if you agree or disagree. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that agree and a lot of people that disagree, but I'm curious. I'm doing this video just to try to get some talk going and hear what everybody thinks.